Thank you, Victoria. Thank you for coming here today. Thank you to everybody who's volunteering to support this talk. I appreciate it, especially Hamed and Mike. It's personally significant for me to be here today because I was born and raised in LA and haven't been back in a while. And so I'm loving the opportunity to be here to share with you about something that's really important to me that I've been trying to figure out, I think, for a long time. Those early childhood experiences that are very difficult and trying to make sense of them. So what I'm here to do today is tell you a story. And the story I want to tell you is a very important story about the human experience. It's so important that it basically is a part of every fiber of our being. And this story is actually much older than the human life form. The story goes way, way back, far, far back into the beginnings of life. And this story is about stress. And this is a story about the intelligence, the power, and the resources that are inside what we call the stress response. And my hope is today that what we might normally associate as a kind of a dungeon or a fearful place, a lurking place that you wouldn't necessarily want to go to, that you might find a key and realize that there's a beautiful, intelligent, radiant, sacred place of energy available to you in relationship to your stress. So I'm going to tell you a little story. In the first place, whoa! Oh yeah, that's what we're supposed to do. The first place we're going to go on our visit is more recent. Just about 5 years ago, this is my younger daughter, Mirabelle, and she was about 4 at the time, and we were at a festival up in Northern California. And there happened to be a puppet troupe of dinosaur educators from Australia there called the Earth Performance Troupe, or Puppet Troupe. And they had these amazing, amazing dinosaurs of all kinds, big, small, and they were very realistic and they were animated, and their premier dinosaur was an adolescent TRex. And the adolescent TRex was inhabited by a person who could really animate it. It had teeth and it had noise and it had very realistic movements. And my daughter, who was that little morsel you saw there, about 4 at the time, we were sitting about 30 or 40 rows back, and at the end of the show, the T-Rex got off the stage and started going down the aisle. And she looked up, and immediately, without saying, screaming, crying, or doing anything, she turned around and she crawled under the folding chair and got in a ball. She was hiding. It was her way of dealing with, wow, that particular creature is more than I can handle right now. So what am I going to do? And it was really amazing just to watch her. At the time, we were just humored. We thought it was hilarious and lovely, and she didn't freak out. She didn't cry. So I want to show you, this is what it looked like coming down the way, the face of it with the big teeth. Pretty realistic, pretty scary. So what instinct in my daughter Mirabelle when she was 4 was activated? Because she wasn't really thinking about it, right? And to understand that, we need to go back in time, not just millions of years ago, not tens of millions, but hundreds of millions of years ago, and understand the origins of our human stress response, of all stress response across all creatures. And also understand what I like to call the Triune Brain model, or what's called the Triune Brain, or the evolutionary model. So this right here is a norepinephrine or adrenaline molecule, and I started asking myself questions. When did the stress response begin? When did we actually start to have that in the history of evolution? Kind of an interesting question. The best I could find out is, here's the evolution of life, of biological life, about 2 billion years old. Right here, 500 million years ago, the earliest molecules that informed the beginning of complex life, where we had 1 or 2 cells started to emerge into more complex forms. It was about at that same time that the earliest brains started forming 550 million years ago in worms, right? So this is at the very foundation of complex life. We have molecules like this. Reptiles didn't even start showing up until about 310 million years ago. Earliest mammals were about 200 million years ago, and then upright human life forms were about just the past couple million years. And it's interesting, and the reason I pointed these out is because this matches up with McLean's Triune Brain model. And in the middle of each of our brains is another brain called the reptilian brain. And it's very fundamental to our instincts, our sense of vitality and survival, right? So here you have a human pretending that they're a giant lizard or reptile going down the aisle, scaring the lizard inside of a child, right? So we start to learn that the way we are designed is like we have an operating system. It's not by chance. The story of evolution and the story of evolutionary psychology and biology have a lot to teach us about who we are in relationship to stress. So, the Triune Brain theory model is not a perfect model. It's a beginner's model, but it's useful because it says, hey, look, deep inside in the middle of your operating system, you have instinctive responses. Those are conserved. You really can't go across those. On top of those reactionary responses to threat, which is instinctual, light, pressure, danger, we have emotions. And the mammals started, and that's where bonding, memory, and learning started to come in. And this is part of who we are as well. And on top of that, we have the human brain, or the neocortex, where the imagination started to form, the organization of thoughts and decisions. And so you can see that early stress molecules informed was there as the whole part of the entire journey of evolution. Okay? And I'm going to tell you how it's there. And this is the work of Robert Sapolsky. It's so much there that I've begun to understand through the work of Robert Sapolsky, who's a Stanford professor of stress and primates and neurobiology, that I no longer think of myself as a fallen angel. I now start to think of myself as an upright, imaginal ape, a hairless ape, who's having the same experiences and conditions that other primates also have. And one of those is that if you're a primate, you're socially cooperative. And one of the things or three of the things that stress us out is if we have status threats, if our bonding is affected or we experience aggression, that's a threat to us. Our threat response engages. We're also socially intelligent. So when we're socially intelligent, and if you start to look at this word fairness, I always think about Fox News. We're fair and balanced, right? They are speaking to that wiring that you and me and everyone else who has a primate ancestry cares about reciprocity. Was that fair? Is this equal? If I give to you, do you give to me? Right? Is this situation predictable? Can I handle it? Can I anticipate it enough? And if any of these are out of our range or our reach, this creates psychosocial and physiologic stress. Now, the amazing thing about being a human is we can apply that same idea of psychosocial and threat and stress to the words in the email thread that are 4 sentences, right? So we can have the same kind of sense of threat. Okay, so 6 in. 6 left. I have a 25-minute talk. 6 in, thank you. Say that was a fast 19 minutes. All right. So the basic story that we hear about stress is it used to be helpful for us back in the old days. But now stress is considered toxic, it's considered harmful. And so a lot of people have an aversion to stress. And with a reason, they're kind of being told it's these kind of things right here. We're often told that, it's draining, it's harmful, it's disruptive, it's costly, and that it's difficult for us. We never hear that it is vitalizing, that stress is beneficial, that stress helps us prioritize, and stress helps us engage. So it's no wonder that we feel the way we do. We see the world of stress as a flat world that if we go too far, we're going to fall off and things are going to end, because that's what we're told. And I just want you to note the reptile here underneath the world, right? So even long ago in the early art of how they imagined the world, they saw the deep reptile inside. But what I'm hoping to show you today is that the world of stress is actually much more than we're being told, or usually what we tend to think. It's a world of horizons, it's a world of possibility, and I'm hoping that you will join me in claiming some of that power that's inside the world of stress. It's not an accident that we're afraid of stress. And the reason is because we've been told there's a scientific model of stress called the allostatic load model. And in this story of stress, We have a singular response. We always have fight or flight every time we get stressed. We're told it's outdated, it's maladaptive, and we're told that it's toxic and that it's harmful to our health. That is not actually true all the time, but it is true because the way they figured this model out is they basically were very cruel to animals in the lab.
Okay.
Very cruel to animals in the lab. So much so that the animals were defeated. So let me give you an example of this. If you were in the lab, they breed mice to be really strong and dominant. They breed mice to be weak and vulnerable. They let the vulnerable mice go into the dominant mouse's cage and get beat up for 20 minutes a day, and then it has to live next to that dominant mouse day after day after day. And then they say, these are the effects of stress. This is the effect of toxic stress at a defeat level. And there is times when stress is toxic to us. If we're isolated, if it's out of control, if it has no meaning, if it's meaningless, or if it's overwhelmed, that we cannot even handle the amount of stress coming into us. And it's really interesting to know that what we have is when we get a threat level response, we get vasoconstriction and we get inflammation. The body's intelligence is priming us for the threat of being attacked or wounded for real. And that's very intelligent. But if you're having a threat level response day in and day out, and you actually aren't, you're actually narrowing and inflaming the body. So that's where you get the illnesses that come from stress response. But fortunately, there's a new model, and this is known scientifically as the adaptive calibration model. And in this model, it says that actually the stress response is actually helping us prime and organize the functional energy of our human body. It's very adapted to us across many dimensions, and additionally, it helps us learn and it helps us bond, okay? So you don't have to know this, but what you need to know is that there's a new story available, and I'm going to show you the components of that story right now. So I like to say that the stress system is the evolutionary installed hyperdrive system. It's what evolution did when we needed more energy and we needed more resources to function, under threat or not under threat. Anytime we needed more vitality in order to be able to adapt, right? So what does it do? How does it actually work? I learned this from Kelly McGonigal, Dr. Kelly McGonigal. She's a stress researcher. She has a great book called The Upside of Stress. If you want to deepen your studies, that would be a good way to go. First thing that happens when we have a stress response is we focus. Mirabelle looks up and she starts to focus. She's beginning to alarm, right? Then she gets the energy, the cascade of adrenaline and other hormones that give us the energy. This is the feeling that you have in your belly, feeling you have left in your belly. Then it helps us connect, which means that it gives us more courage and gives us more ability to want to be connected to others. And it also helps us grow. We can learn and adapt through this. So, what are the stress responses that are available to us through that? We know that there's fight, flight, and freeze. Mirabelle's was kind of a hide and response. We also know from the science story that you can have a defeat response, that you can actually give up, no longer want to live because it's too overwhelming, right? But the new science tells us that there's a challenge response. The new science tells us that we can actually associate and affiliate and connect with other people. That is overwhelming. I think I'm going to go get my friends because I'm a primate, and I'm going to ally with them because I'm going to be safer in a group than I'm going to be by myself. It also tells us that if the stress is long enough, we will grow and we will learn. We will change and we will adapt. These are positive things. These are anti-inflammatory, antioxidant hormones of connection that run through our body. I also think that there's a problem with how we imagine it. We need to re-language the conversation about stress. What if instead of flight, which sounds like a coward, is defer and regroup? What if instead of defeat we said, hey, we surrendered? And what if we saw that there was isolation and pride as the downside to the growth and to the tend and befriend response, or the affiliation. What you see here is a list of things that are conflictual. I'm willing to give up. I'm willing to sacrifice because the danger and the threat is so high. What you see here is things are relational. I'm gonna stay intact. But we don't think about it like this. This is how we experience it. We experience this because we're not running from tigers on a day-to-day basis. We're in rooms working with other people and having to deal with earning money and getting survival another way. So we experience the threat response with things like obstruction, blaming, argumentativeness. When people are deceptive or dismissive, you start to see that that is what is happening for people. This is a list of people of behaviors and strategies of someone who's in a threat response, right? What if we could transform those? What if we could make it possible to start to engage and start to see, whoa, this is possibly a challenge. This physiologic feelings, this emotional feeling, this series of responses is asking me to be more present and more vital and engaged in life, right? What if it was that? What if it was that possibility? So my suggestion to you today, that stress is the most ancient, fundamental, priming instinct that we have, that it's deeper than emotional intelligence, that emotional intelligence is a reflection of whether we feel threatened or whether we feel safe. That our stress is like a cockpit. It's a series of signals of information that could happen through heart rate and breath, that could happen through emotions or racing thoughts that keep us up at night. But ultimately, it's part of our vital instinct that is trying to help us survive, that is trying to help us live, right? What if people started to understand how to coordinate their stress? Meaning they you know how you have to get body coordination and you have to learn how your body works as a kid? Well, in a way, isn't that what we're trying to do with our stress response? Coordinate our instincts for survival, coordinate our emotions and our logic. What if everybody in this room understood the ability of, oh, this is actually not bad. This is my body's evolutionary intelligence telling me I don't feel safe or I do feel safe. What if it's trying to prime you to see things as a challenge? What if we could learn the difference between what's a true threat and what's an opportunity? What if we could learn how to use stress as a way to align with each other and to connect and to learn and grow in order to adapt? What if that happened in this room right here? What if that happened in a 50-mile radius every direction around here, that every human being, particularly, remember, what is most stressful? If you're isolated, if it's out of your control, if it has no point and you're overwhelmed. You know, I think that the intelligence of stress is actually you look at what people do and it starts to make sense, right? That you think about the poverty, you think about the hardships that people go through, and what if it was possible in the war rooms, in the chambers, in the bedrooms, and in the living rooms of families, of people's lives all across the world, they could become more intelligent with their stress and understand stress's intelligence and helping them in their lives. Because remember, how you do or how you don't do stress makes or breaks relationships. Thank you for your time.
Do we have any questions? We have a few minutes. Questions about stress?
So you're talking about having different responses to stress, so then there's a decision that needs to be made when those times come. So how do you decide which direction to take your stress? If you're going to, would it defer and regroup or challenge, etc.?
Yeah, that's the million-dollar question, right? If I could tell people when to do that, right? But that's part of stress coordination. That's part of the learning response of how you learn, like, oh yeah, this response works really well, this response doesn't work well. So it's an internal conversation, but just having the power in the language to know that, like, oh, maybe it's okay for me to flight. Maybe I don't have to view it negatively. Maybe I just say, you know what? I'm deferring and regrouping, and I'm going to go over here, and I'm going to wait until my whole system is actually ready to engage with this issue. It's a lot of permission. One of the things I really get from this material is permission. How much time do we actually have? No time.
We have,
You got 3
we have more
minutes.
questions?
How many?
You got 3 minutes.
Oh, I have 3 minutes. I felt like I was running fast. Yes.
No, I just don't want to push you along. I know you got a late start.
Okay.
So,
Yeah.
questions?
Question?
Was there a question?
There we go.
Let me try to phrase this.
Yeah.
Trying to know yourself well enough to know the difference between eustress and distress and which direction to go. Maybe.
Yeah.
I'm thinking maybe it's the observing your own behavior, how you're reacting to it. But do you have any more comment on that?
Stress is distress from the science that I understand when you're isolated, when you really are alone with something and you need help, when it has no point or meaning, and when it has, it's overwhelming for you, right? So the point isn't not to have stress or for us to eliminate all stress. The point is to be equal to it and find your capacity to it. So if you feel distress, what is meaningful? Who can I connect with around it? If it's overwhelming to me, what part of it am I actually equal to? You know, where can I get a sense of positive control and relationship to it, right? So then it's not distress. It's just another opportunity to learn. You have a follow-up? Yeah.
Right. Just speaking about eustress is,
Yes.
is using stress positively, or understanding that it's a real motivator and driver for good performance, for great performance.
That's right.
And then being able to transition from distress to eustress.
Yes, it's a living system. And usually our unconscious will tell us in some way when we're out of balance. Our forebrains might think we're in balance, but sometimes things will like emerge like, oh my gosh, I just failed that. I guess I wasn't as prepared as I thought I was, right? So I would just say trust the organic system. It is there teaching you. There's no formula that's gonna make everything clean and clear from now till the end of each of our lives. Thank you.